Hello, listening squirrels. We're back to the chapter, part 2 of the chapter about Grandma. Go back. I really don't know when we should have stopped if Sally had not got choked with the nut she had in her mouth and so frightened us nearly out of our wits. What became of the things and how were you punished? Asked Fan in the middle of her laughter. The remains of the feast went to the pig, and we were kept on bread and water for 3 days. Did that cure you? Oh dear no, we had 6 other frolics that very summer, and although I cannot help laughing at the remembrance of this, you must not think, child, that I approve of such conduct or excuse it. No, my dear, far from it. I call that a tip-top story. Drive on, Grandma, and tell one about boys, broke in a new voice, and there was Tom, astride of a chair, listening and laughing with all his might, for his book had come to an end, and he had joined the party unobserved. Wait for your turn, Tommy. Now, Polly, dear, what will you have? Said Grandma, looking so lively and happy that it was very evident reminiscing did her good. Let mine come last, and tell one for Tom next, said Polly, looking around and beckoning him nearer. He came and sat himself cross-legged on the floor before the lower drawer of the cabinet, which Grandma opened for him, saying with a benign stroke of the curly head, There, dear, that's where I keep the little memorials of my brother Jack. Poor lad, he was lost at sea, you know. Well, choose anything you like, and I'll try to remember a story about it. Tom made a rapid rummage and fished up a little broken pistol. There, that's the chap for me. Wish it wasn't spoiled, then we'd have fun popping away at the cats in the yard. Now then, Grandma. I remember one of Jack's pranks when that was used with great effect, said Grandma after a thoughtful pause, during which Tom teased the girls by snapping the lock of the pistol in their faces. Once upon a time, continued Madam, much flattered by the row of interested faces before her, my father went away on business, leaving Mother, Aunt, and us girls to Jack's care. Very proud he was, to be sure, of the responsibility, and the first thing he did was to load that pistol and keep it by his bed. In our great worriment, we feared he'd kill himself with it. For a week all went well, then we were startled by the news that robbers were about. All sorts of stories flew through the town. We were living in the country then. Some said that certain houses were marked with a black cross, and those were always robbed. Others, that there was a boy in the gang, for windows so small they were considered safe were entered by some little rogue. At one place the thieves had a supper and left ham and cake in the front yard. Mrs. Jones found Mrs. Smith's shawl in her orchard with a hammer and an unknown teapot near it. One man reported that someone tapped at his window in the night, saying softly, Is anyone here? And when he looked out, 2 men were seen to run down the road. We lived just out of town in a lonely place. The house was old, with convenient little back windows and 5 outside doors. Jack was the only man about the place, and he was barely 13. Mother and Aunt were very timid, and the children were old enough to be of any use. So Jack and I were the home guard and vowed to defend the family manfully. Good for you. Hope the fellas came, cried Tom, charmed with this opening. One day an ill-looking man came in and asked for food, continued Grandma with a mysterious nod, and while he ate, I saw him glance sharply about from the wooden buttons on the back doors to the silver urn and tankards on the dining room sideboard. A strong suspicion took possession of me, and I watched him as a cat does a mouse. He came to examine the premises, I'm sure of it, but we will be ready for him, I said fiercely, as I told the family about him. This fancy haunted us all, and our preparations were very funny. Mother borrowed a rattle and kept it under her pillow. Aunt took a big bell to bed with her. The children had little Tip, the terrier, to sleep in their room, while Jack and I mounted guard, he with a pistol and I with a hatchet, for I didn't like firearms. Biddy, who slept in the attic, practiced getting out of the shed roof so that she might run away at the first alarm. Every night we arranged pitfalls for the robbers, and all filed up to bed bearing plate, money, weapons, and things to barricade with as if we lived in war times. We waited a week and no one came, so we began to feel rather slighted. For other people got a scare, as Tom says, and after all our preparations, we really felt a trifle disappointed that we had no chance to show our courage. At last, a black mark was found upon our door, and a great panic ensued, for we felt that now our time had come. That night we put a tub of water at the bottom of the back stairs and a pile of tin pans at the top of the front stairs, so that any attempt to come up would produce a splash or a rattle. Bells were hung on door handles, sticks of wood piled up in dark corners for robbers to fall over, and the family retired all armed and all provided with lamps and matches. Jack and I left our doors open and kept asking one another if we didn't hear something till he fell asleep. I was wakeful and lay listening to the crickets till the clock struck 12. Then I got drowsy and was just dropping off when the sound of steps outside woke me up, staring wide awake. Creeping to the window, I was in time to see, by the dim moonlight, a shadow glide round the corner and disappear. I wonder if it's not their dad coming back. A queer little thrill went over me, but I resolved to keep quiet till I was sure something was wrong, for I had given so many false alarms. I didn't want Jack to laugh at me again. Popping my head out of the door, I listened and presently heard a scraping sound near the shed. There they are, but I won't rouse the house till the bell rings or the pans fall. The rogues can't go far without a clatter of some sort, and if we could only catch one of them, we should get the reward and a deal of glory, I said to myself, grasping my hatchet firmly. A door closed softly below, and a step came creeping towards the back stairs. Sure now of my prey, I was just about to scream "Jack!" when something went splash into the tub at the foot of the back stairs. In a minute, everyone was awake and up, for Jack fired his pistol before he was half out of bed and roared, "Fire!" so loud it roused the house. Mother sprung her rattle, Aunt rang her bell, Jip barked like mad, and we all screamed, while from below came up a regular Irish howl. Someone brought a lamp, and we peeked anxiously down to see our own stupid Biddy sitting in the tub, wringing her hands and wailing dismally. So I guess it's the help who's Biddy. "Oh, murther, and it's killed I am. The saints be about us. However did I come? Florence, this..." I can't read this like it's supposed to be. It's Irish. "Just crapping in quiet." It's supposed to be creeping. "After a bit of a stroll with Mike Mahoney, me own by that's to marry me entirely come St. Patrick's Day next." So we laughed so we could hardly fish the poor thing up, or listen while she explained that she had slipped out of her window for a word with Mike, and found it fastened when she wanted to come back, so she sat on the roof trying to discover the cause of the mysterious barring out till she was tired, when she prowled round the house till she found a cellar window unfastened. After all our care, and got in quite cleverly, she thought, but the tub was a new arrangement which she knew nothing about, and when she fell into the say, she was bewildered and could only howl, S-A-Y. This was not all the damage either, for Aunt fainted with the fright, Mother cut her hand with a broken lamp, the children took cold hopping about on the wet stairs, Jip barked himself sick, I sprained my ankle, and Jack not only smashed a looking glass with his bullets, but spoilt his pistol by the heavy charge put in it. After the damages were repaired and the flurry was well over, Jack confessed that he had marked the door for fun and shut Biddy out as a punishment for gallivanting, of which he didn't approve, such a rogue as that boy was. "But didn't the robbers ever come?" cried Tom, enjoying the joke but feeling defrauded of the fight. "Never, my dear. But we had our scare and tested our courage, and that was a great satisfaction, of course," answered Grandma placidly. "Well, I think you are the bravest of the lot. I'd like to have seen you flourishing around there with your hatchet," added Tom admiringly, and the old lady looked as much pleased with the compliment as if she had been a girl. "I choose this," said Polly, holding up a long white kid glove, shrunken and yellow with time, but looking as if it had a history. "Ah, that now has a story worth telling," cried Grandma, adding proudly, "Treat that old glove respectfully, my children, for Lafayette's honored hand has touched it." "Oh, Grandma, did you wear it? Did you see him? Do tell us about it, and that will be the best of the whole," cried Polly, who loved history and knew a good deal about the gallant Frenchman and his brave life. Grandma loved to tell this story and always assumed her most imposing air to do honor to her theme. Drawing herself up, therefore, she folded her hands, and after 2 or 3 little began with an absent look as if her eyes beheld a faraway time, which brightened as she gazed. "The first visit of Lafayette was before my time, of course, but I heard so much about it from my grandfather that I really felt as if I'd seen it all. Our Aunt Hancock lived in the governor's house on Beacon Hill at the time." Here the old lady bridled up still more, for she was very proud of our aunt. "Ah, my dears, those were the good old times," she continued with a sigh. "Such dinners and tea parties, such damask tablecloths and fine plate, such solid, handsome furniture and elegant carriages. Aunt's, A-U-N-T, was lined," and that's apostrophe S, so hers. Her aunt's was lined with red silk velvet, and when the coach was taken away from her at the governor's death, she just ripped out the lining, and we girls had spencers made of it. I don't know what spencers are. Dear heart, how well I remember playing in Aunt's great garden and chasing Jack up and down those winding stairs, and my blessed father, in his plum-colored coat and knee breeches, and the queue I used to tie up for him every day, handing Aunt in to dinner looking so dignified and splendid." Grandma seemed to forget her story for a minute, and became a little girl again among the playmates dead and gone so many years. Polly motioned the others to be quiet. No one spoke till the old lady with a long sigh came back to the present and went on. "Well, as I was saying, the governor wanted to give a breakfast to the French officers, and Madame, who was a hospitable soul, got up a splendid one for them. But by some mistake or accident, it was discovered at the last minute there was no milk. A great deal was needed, and very little could be bought or borrowed. So despair fell upon the cooks and maids, and the great breakfast would have been a failure if Madame, with the presence of mind of her sex, had not suddenly bethought herself of the cows feeding on the common. To be sure, they belonged to her neighbors, and there was no time to ask leave, but it was a national affair. Our allies must be fed, and feeling sure that her patriotic friends would gladly lay their cows on the altar of their country, Madam Hancock covered herself with glory by calmly issuing the command, "Milk 'em!" It was done, to the great astonishment of the cows and the entire satisfaction of the guest, among whom was Lafayette. This milking feat was such a good joke that no one seems to have remembered much about the great man, though one of his officers' account signalized himself by getting very tipsy and going to bed with his boots and spurs on, which caused the destruction of Aunt's best yellow damask coverlet, for the restless sleeper kicked it into rags by morning. Aunt valued it very much, even in its tattered condition, and kept it a long while as a memorial of her distinguished guest. The time when I saw Lafayette was 1825, and there were no tipsy counts then. Uncle Hancock, a sweet man, my dears, though some call him mean nowadays, was dead, and Aunt had married Captain Scott. It was not at all the thing for her to do, however. That's neither here nor there. She was living in Federal Street at the time, a most aristocratic street then, children, and we lived close by. Old Josiah Quincy was mayor of the city, and he sent Aunt word that Marquis Lafayette wished to pay his respects to her. Of course, she was delighted, and we all flew about to make ready for him. Aunt was an old lady, but she made a grand toilet and was as anxious to look well as any girl. "What did she wear?" asked Fan with interest. "She wore a steel-colored satin trimmed with black lace, and on her cap was pinned a Lafayette badge of white satin. I never shall forget how beautifully she looked as she sat in state on the front parlor sofa, right under a great portrait of her first husband, and on either side of her sat Madame Storer and Madame Williams, elegant to behold in their stiff silks, rich lace, and stately turbans. We don't see such splendid old ladies nowadays." "I think we do sometimes," said Polly slyly. Grandma shook her head, but it pleased her very much to be admired, for she had been a beauty in her day. "We girls had dressed the house with flowers. Old Mr. Coolidge sent in a clothes basket full. Joe Joy provided the badges, and Aunt got out some of the Revolutionary wine from the old Beacon Street cellar. I wore my green and white palmyrene, Palmyrine. My hair bowed high, the beautiful leg of mutton sleeves were so becoming, and these very gloves. Well, by and by, the general, escorted by the mayor, drove up. Dear me, I see him now, a little man in nankeen, Nankeen, trousers and vest, a long blue coat and ruffled shirt, leaning on his cane, for he was lame, and smiling and bowing like a true Frenchman. As he approached, the three old ladies rose and curtsied with the utmost dignity. Lafayette bowed first to the governor's picture, then to the governor's widow, and kissed her hand. That was droll, for the back of her glove was stamped Lafayette's likeness, and the gallant old gentleman kissed his own face. Then some of the young ladies were presented, and as if to escape any further self-salutations, the Marquis kissed the pretty girls on the cheek. Yes, my dears, here is just the spot where the dear old man saluted me. I'm quite as proud of it now as I was then, for he was a brave, good man and helped us out in our trouble. He didn't stay long, but we were very merry, drinking his health, receiving his compliments, and enjoying the honor he did us. Down in the street there was a crowd, of course, and when he left, they wanted to take out the horses and drag him home in triumph, but he didn't wish it. And while that affair was being arranged, we girls had been pelting him with the flowers which we tore from the vases, the walls, and our own top knots to scatter over him. He liked that and laughed and waved his hand to us while we ran and pelted and begged him to come again. We young folks quite lost our heads that night and haven't a very clear idea of how I got home. The last thing I remember was hanging out of the window with a flock of girls watching the carriage roll away, while the crowd cheered as if they were mad. Bless my heart, it seems as if I heard 'em now. Hurrah for Lafayette and Mayor Quincy. Hurrah for Madam Hancock and the pretty girls. Hurrah for Colonel May. 3 cheers for Boston. Now then, hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. And there the old lady stopped, out of breath, with her cap askew, her spectacles on the end of her nose, and her knitting much the worse for being waved enthusiastically in the air while she hung over the arm of her chair, shrilly cheering an imaginary Lafayette. The girls clapped their hands, and Tom hurrahed with all his might, saying when he got his breath, "Lafayette was a regular old trump. I always liked him." "My dear, what a disrespectful way to speak of that great man," said Grandma, shocked at young America's irreverence. "Well, he was a trump anyway, so why not call him one?" asked Tom, feeling that the objectionable word was all that could be desired. "What queer gloves you wore then," interrupted Fanny, who had been trying on the much-honored glove and finding it a tight fit. "Much better and cheaper than we have now," returned Grandma, ready to defend the good old times against every insinuation. You're an extravagant set nowadays, and I really don't know what you're coming to. By the way, I've got somewhere 2 letters written by the young ladies, one in 1517, I think that's wrong, and the other in 1868. The contrast between the two will amuse you, I think. 1517. After a little search, Grandma produced an old portfolio, and selecting the papers, well, maybe so, read the following letter written by Anne Boleyn before her marriage to Henry VIII, and now in the possession of a celebrated antiquarian. "Dear Mary, I have been in town almost a month, yet I cannot say I have found anything in London extremely agreeable. We rise so late in the morning, seldom before 6 o'clock, and sit up so late at night, being scarcely in bed before 10, that I am quite sick of it, and was it not for the abundance of fine things I am every day getting, I should be impatient of returning into the country. My indulgent mother bought me yesterday at a merchant's in Cheapside 3 new shifts that cost 14 pence an ell, E-L-L, and I am to have a pair of new stuffed shoes for my Lord of Norfolk's ball, which will be 3 shillings. The irregular life I have led since my coming to this place has quite destroyed my appetite. You know I could manage a pound of bacon and a tankard of good ale for my breakfast in the country. But in London I find it difficult to get through half the quantity, though I must own I'm generally eager enough for the dinner hour, which is here delayed till 12, in your polite society. I played at hot cockles last night at my Lord of... I think it's pronounced Leicester's. The Lord of Surrey was here, a very elegant young man who sung a song of his own composition on the Lord of Kildare's daughter. It was much approved, and my brother whispered me that the fair Geraldine, for so my Lord of Surrey calls his sweetheart, is the finest woman of the age. I should be grateful to see her, for I hear she is as good as she is beautiful. Pray take care of the poultry during my absence, poor things. I always feed them myself, and if Marjorie has knitted me the crimson worsted mittens, I should be glad if they were sent up the first opportunity. Adieu, dear Mary. I am just going to Mass and tell you, and you shall speedily have the prayers, as you have now the kindest love of your own Anne Boleyn. Up before 6 and think it late to go to bed at 10? What a countrified thing Anne must have been. Bacon and ale for breakfast and dinner at 12. How very queer to live so, cried Fanny. Lord Surrey and Lord Leicester sound fine, but hot cockles and red mittens and shoes for 3 shillings are horrid. I like it, said Polly thoughtfully, and I'm glad poor Anne had a little fun before her troubles began. May I copy that letter sometime, Grandma? Yes, dear, and welcome. Now here's the other by a modern girl on her first visit to London. This will suit you better, Fan. And Grandma read what a friend had sent her as a pendant to Anne's little picture of London life long ago. My dearest Constance, after 3 months of intense excitement, I snatch a leisure moment to tell you how much I enjoy my first visit to London. Having been educated abroad, it really seems like coming to a strange city. At first, the smoke, dirt, and noise were very disagreeable, but I soon got used to these things, and now find all I see perfectly charming. We plunged at once into a world of gaiety, and I've had no time to think of anything but pleasure. It's the height of the season, and every hour is engaged either in going to balls, concerts and theaters, fetes in church, or in preparing for them. We often go to 2 or 3 parties in an evening and seldom get home till morning. So of course we don't rise till noon next day. The leaves very little time. This leaves very little time for our drives shopping and calls before dinner at 8, and then the evening gaieties begin again. At a ball at Lady Russell's last night I saw the Prince of Wales and danced in the set with him. He's growing stout and looks dissipated. I was disappointed in him, for neither in appearance nor conversation was at all princely. I was introduced to a very brilliant and delightful young gentleman from America. I was charmed with him and rather surprised to learn that he wrote the poems which were so much admired last season. Also that he is the son of a rich tailor. How odd these Americans are with their money and talent and independence. Oh, my dear, I must not forget to tell you the great event of the first season. I am to be presented at the next drawing room. Think how absorbed I must be in preparation for this grand affair. Mama is resolved that I shall do her credit. We have spent the last 2 weeks driving about from milliners to mantua makers, from merchants to jewelers. I am to wear white satin and plumes, pearls and roses. My dates will cost £100 or more apiece. No, £100 or more, and is very elegant. My cousins and friends lavish lovely things upon me, and you will open your unsophisticated eyes when I display my silks and laces, trinkets and French hats, not to mention billet doux, D-E-U-X, photographs and other relics of a young belle's first season. You ask if I ever think of home. I really haven't had time, but do sometimes long a little for the quiet, the pure air, and the girlish amusements I used to enjoy so much. One gets pale and old and sadly fagged out with all this dissipation. Pleasant as it is, I feel quite, I can't tell if that's blase already. If you could send me the rosy cheeks, bright eyes, and gay spirits I always had at home, I'd thank you. As you cannot do that, please send me a bottle of June rainwater, for my maid tells me it's better than any cosmetic for the complexion, and mine is getting ruined by late hours. I fancy some fruit off our own trees would suit me, for I have no appetite, and Mama is quite desolate about me. One cannot live on French cookery without dyspepsia, and one can get nothing simple here, for food, like everything else, is regulated by the fashion. Adieu, ma chère, I must dress for church. I only wish you could see my new hat and go with me, for Lord Rockingham promised to be there. Adieu, yours eternally, Florence. Yes, I do like that better and wish I had been in this girl's place, don't you, Polly? Said Fan as Grandma took off her glasses. I should love to go to London and have a good time, but I don't think I should care about spending ever so much money or going to court. Maybe I might when I got there, for I do like fun and splendor, added honest Polly, feeling that pleasure was a very tempting thing. Grandma looks tired. Let's go and play in the drawing room, said Maud, who found the conversation getting beyond her depth. Let us all kiss and thank Grandma for amusing us so nicely before we go, whispered Polly. Maud and Fanny agreed, and Grandma looked so gratified by their thanks that Tom followed suit, merely waiting for those poor girls were out of sight to give the old lady a hearty hug and a kiss on the very cheek Lafayette had saluted. When he reached the playroom, Polly was sitting in the swing, saying very earnestly, I always told you it was nice up in Grandma's room, and now you see it is. I wish you'd go oftener. She admires to have you and likes to tell stories and do pleasant things. Only she thinks you don't care for her quiet sort of fun. I do anyway, and I think she's the kindest, best old lady that ever loved, and I love her dearly. I didn't say she wasn't, only old people are sort of tedious and fussy, so I keep out of their way, said Fanny. Well, you ought not to, and you miss lots of pleasant times. My mother says we ought to be kind and patient and respectable to all old folks just because they're old, and I always mean to be. Your mother's everlasting preaching, muttered Fan, nettled by the consciousness of her own shortcomings with regard to Grandma. She don't preach, cried Polly, firing up like a flash. She only explains things to us and helps us to be good and never scolds, and I'd rather have her than any other woman in the world, though she won't wear velvet cloaks and splendid bonnets. So now, go it, Polly, called Tom, who was gracefully hanging head down from the bar put up for his special benefit. Polly's mad, sung Maud, skipping rope around the room. If Mr. Sidney could see you now, he wouldn't think you were such an angel anymore, added Fanny, tossing a beanbag in her head at the same time. Whew, Lord help, 35 minutes and it's still going on. There's not much more, but I don't have it in me, y'all. So, what I will do is tomorrow, Lord willing and the creek don't rise, I'll finish this up and start the next chapter. Because it's only like 3 or 4 more pages, but phew. And y'all know my throat's constantly horsey-fied. My new hooks, aren't they beautiful? Okay, I'm going to go in here and give them a test drive. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. See you in the YouTube streets, as I'm not live today. But I hope to see you tomorrow live. Well, today around, and tomorrow back here in Squirrel Corner. 5 bells. See you soon. Be sweet, don't be ugly. I may have already said that. I don't know. Anyway, love you. Bye.